Asia as a region is most affected by climate change, we can see that Asian countries are dealing differently with climate change. The climate ambition varies really a lot within the region, but therefore also FES is trying to provide support and really building also these broad progressive alliances that can bridge between different stakeholders and formulate voices within Asia so that they can also come together and really pitch what is most important for Asian countries to have in the future loss and damage fund and how climate finance will be available.
The loss and damage fund has been operationalized, and the initial contributions came up to about $700 million from a few contributor countries. We made pledges to the fund. This is woefully inadequate, and it is estimated that the amount of money required for countries to cope with loss and damage is estimated to be anywhere between $300 to $700 billion a year.
So the current governance structure of loss and damage fund, it provides quite a good space for developing countries. So it is encouraged those countries to nominate board members with expertise in technical expertise. That's one. And also there is also the expert panel to support the operation of the board of this fund. And this also allows engagement of stakeholder groups, youth groups, CSOs, indigenous communities. So governance structure of loss and damage fund allows developing countries to have their stronger voice.
And civil society will be putting pressure on the board to make sure that all the decisions on how the fund is to be utilized will be done in a manner where those who have been affected, those who are suffering most of the consequences of climate change are the ones who get priority in receiving the funds. Given the number of extreme weather events which are going on at present, there's going to be a lot of demand for the funds. So it is vital that the governance aspects of the loss and damage fund, which will decide on who's vulnerable, who's eligible, who should get the money first, who governs, who's the representation on the board of the loss and damage fund, which will make all these decisions, is all critical.
A very key component we need to think about for loss and damages fund is whether the fund will really go, the use of proceeds, whether the grant or whatever shape or form, the funding can really go in the hands of people who are most affected by climate change without adding to their burden. Then those who are most vulnerable really should have a say, in the governance of the fund, right? How to ensure that they have a seat at the table. I think this would be very critical.
Vietnam has pledged to be CO2 neutral by 2050, which is really ambitious, and the international community is applauding Vietnam for this kind of ambition. But in order to get there, we need sizable climate finance available. Vietnam is now part of the Just Energy Transition Partnership, which will help in getting some of the financing, for example, for projects like updating the grid, bringing really also renewables to the grid and therefore making renewables accessible to the whole society. But still, there are a lot of hurdles that Asian countries need to pass.
For example, low-income farmers and other vulnerable groups who are already bearing the brunt of economic downturns and the extreme inequality in the country. So I think I look at loss and damages fund, the more that these vulnerable groups can access the financing, the funding, it's also not only to help with climate change impact, but also potentially help with bridging or at least alleviating inequality in Thailand. So I think that when we think about things like inclusive economy, which should be the aim going forward in the future for economic development, loss and damages fund to me has these sort of implications.
How well do governments know about the global stocktake? That's a very interesting question. Obviously, the negotiators who represent our countries at the UNFCCC, they know about it. The evidence we see, at least in countries in Southeast Asia, is that it's limited. outside those who are in the Department of Climate Change and the Ministry of Environment, because countries are not adopting a whole of government approach towards the climate change. We need to create the institutional framework within the countries whereby all agencies within government are taking action and deciding, like, it could be agriculture, it could be defense, it could be rural development. Every one of them has to assess all the activities and see how much are we contributing to climate change and how can we reduce emissions. And in this way, the global stocktake can be mainstreamed within the government.
I want Thailand to hopefully see the global stocktake as one component to build our green growth strategy.
UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, Paris Agreement both contain the language actions for climate empowerment. And these actions for climate empowerment is about the public participation, education, and training, access to information, and international cooperation. So this is directly related to role of CSOs and other multi-stakeholder groups. So without their active role in climate action, we wouldn't be able to raise ambition of governments. So, and also in addition to that, many of our actions, solutions are being developed and implemented by very diverse multi-stakeholder groups.
So for us as FES, we've always came from the perspective that we want to put forward a just transition. For us, it's pivotal to really bring together just aspects into the climate world and close the gap also between different stakeholders. And then hopefully through a platform like the Just Transition Forum Asia, we can also support progressive and broad stakeholder alliances to really put forward their voices in international climate negotiations.